My name is Henry Tam. I'm the Principal Technical Solutions Marketing Manager for Redis. And I'm really excited to be back with Angelbeat. I did a financial services presentation, I think, last quarter. And today, my topic is real-time fraud detection with Redis Enterprise. And so with that, I'm going to dive right in. I'm going to cover the specific type of fraud that I am talking about, because there are obviously all types of fraud, payment fraud, the challenges of using machine learning for fraud detection, why Redis Enterprise, and then the specific use case and solution that Redis provides around being a feature store, and then have a quick overview of an actual customer that deployed Redis for transaction risk scoring. So I mentioned earlier that payment fraud is the specific type of fraud that I'm going to be talking about today. I think we all know it's widespread and it continues to be a problem for the industry. Just a quick stat here, $38.5 billion in expected credit card losses by 2027. That has to all do with obviously stolen credit card information, fraudulent payments, etc. So what can we do about that? Well, I think we all know that fraud's been around, this payment fraud's been around a while. But what's really changed, I think, around not only the environment, but what we need to do to improve our fraud detection is that consumers expect instant responses nowadays. I talked about milliseconds matter last time, but really when you think through about all the digital channels that we as consumers purchase or make transactions, whether it's through some sort of mobile app or whether it's through social media, obviously website, etc. Everyone expects then their purchases or their transactions to go through instantly. And so fraud detection can't really introduce friction into that process. And so a lot of financial services companies and merchants are utilizing AL and ML for something called transaction risk scoring to be able to not only better detect and have more accurate predictions of whether a transaction is fraudulent or not, but they really want to be able to improve the response time so that it does not obviously interfere or cause friction in that process. So what is the challenge then? Is that if you're basing your fraud detection models and data on traditional or legacy databases, they really weren't built for what I'm calling the digital economy, right? So typically, if it's some sort of relational database or some sort of mainframe-based, this called SQL database, they're typically slow and inefficient because obviously they were designed for a specific schema in mind, and a lot of the data that's required, as I'll show later, that's required for these ML models to really detect it involves a lot of different data types. They're not just numbers in a row and column, right? And then of course the inability to scale. As I mentioned previously, when you're doing a transaction, especially during, let's say, holiday season shopping, where there's a lot of peak activity or peak transactions happening, you really need to be able to scale to be able to handle not only the actual transaction, but detection of the fraud if there is behind that transaction. So why Redis Enterprise? I'm sure, hopefully, everyone is familiar with Redis. Redis Enterprise is really built on top of the most loved cache and database solution, the Redis open source. So Redis Enterprise layers on top of Redis open source with a number of key enterprise capabilities, including linear scalability, durability, what we are calling active-active geo distribution, and then something called tier memory access, so that enables you to use flash drives or SSDs in addition to actual memory or DRAM. And so really, with the capabilities that Redis Enterprise provides, this ties in to the criticality of fraud detection and why you need an enterprise solution. So let's get specific to what Redis Enterprise can do with regards to fraud detection. So the first, really the key capability is around using Redis as a feature store, and I'll explain in a few slides what that is, and with sub-second feature retrieval. And you're going to see how that ties directly to what I call, not introducing friction in the overall fraud detection process. And then the second piece of where Redis fits from an overall real-time ML data perspective is, feature store for vectors. I'm mostly going to focus on this first use case as it relates to fraud detection, but I wanted to also discuss Redis as a vector database because, as we know, the whole generative AI, chat GPT, large language models has become such a huge subject of conversation, but that's not the purpose of my discussion today. So let me just kind of dive really quickly to explaining what a feature store is and how being powered by Redis will enable some of those fraud detection capabilities in real time. So really a feature store is the repository, if you want, for all the different types of what we call features in the AI ML terminology. And features are really just a set of data that is fed into a ML model for various predictive analytics. In this case, for detecting whether a particular transaction has a high risk of it being fraudulent or a low risk. And so really, there are many ways to develop this online feature store. And there are open source frameworks, there are commercial versions, but suffice to say, the key here is that when we talk about online feature store, it's because a lot of those features, you need the latest and greatest set of those data. You can train your model using sources from your data warehouse through the traditional batch process. But when it comes to actual production and you're actually doing your inferencing with whatever AI model you've chosen to use, that's where you really need those real-time data. And Redis as the data store for those real-time features is the key capability that we bring. So just as a quick example, this is an example architecture that we have partnered with NVIDIA and Feast. Feast is a open source feature store framework. NVIDIA, obviously, I think everyone knows who they are. And this happens to be using a PyTorch model. And so as you can see in here, the Redis acting as the online feature for real-time inferencing. In this case, leveraging things like zip code and credit history as an example. And we also partner with a company called Tecton that offers a commercial platform for feature stores. And they did a benchmark, I think will be illustrative of what I was talking about, which is that they showed that with Redis Enterprise, there was 3 times faster producing single-digit latencies, and more importantly, 14 times less expensive than, let's say, using DynamoDB as that feature store. And you can see the data set here. And so I think this is really, making the point that, using Redis and specifically Redis Enterprise for online feature store as it applies in this case to fraud detection is going to be critical. So let's dive really into the customer story of a large US bank that was trying to implement a new real-time risk scoring microservice. And that risk score was going to be fed into their fraud management solution and ultimately make the final decision of whether to approve or deny that transaction. And they were getting a number of different features. Again, these are just representative examples. Can't get into the exact details, obviously. But really, they were using, in this case, MongoDB as their feature store repository. And it just wasn't performing enough. And it was actually reducing the number, the response time. And so what it ended up happening is that they POC with Redis and decided to go with us as the online feature store. And we were able to improve the serving of those features to the model up to 60x using us in our in-memory architecture. So now the risk scoring microservice was able to provide that risk score to that fraud management system and make more faster and more accurate either approvals or denial of that transaction. And because Redis Enterprise has all those enterprise features around availability and active-active replication, we can deliver 5 nines of availability to ensure that something as critical as fraud detection never goes down, especially during peak traffic. So with that, I'm going to end with a quick reminder that while I talked about fraud detection, just wanted to bring up what I showed last time, which is that really consider Redis for a number of real-time financial service use cases. I talked about digital banking. Today, I cover fraud detection, using us as the online feature store. But even in areas around trading and asset management, whether it's real-time reporting or doing reference and market data caching, we have a number of use cases where I think using Redis really does make the most sense. So with that, I want to thank you for your time.